Welcome back, everybody, to Niners Now. I'm your host, Brady Grustas, at GrustasBrady on X. You can follow me there. And the Niners have made a trade, adding wide receiver Sky Moore from the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll go into detail about this move, and I also want to do a little retrospective today. What are the top 5 moves in John Lynch's career as a GM? Stay tuned because a former 49er has mentioned that they might like to return to San Francisco. And of course, stick around until later in the show when I'll be covering the names around the league who are most likely to be traded or cut before week 1. Before we begin though, go ahead and subscribe down below, leave a like, leave a comment, and let's get into it. We just hit 100 subscribers on this channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for commenting. It's been a blast making these videos so far. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that button down below. Now let's talk about this Sky Moore trade. The San Francisco 49ers are trading their 2027 6th round pick to the Kansas City Chiefs in exchange for the Chiefs' 2027 7th round pick and wide receiver Sky Moore. And yes, that is a Sky with 2 Ys. That is not a typo. That's how his name is really spelled. Moore was a 2nd round pick by the Chiefs back in 2022. And he's been a total bust in the NFL so far after an electric Western Michigan career. Moore has extensive punt return experience. He actually just had an 88-yard return touchdown in the Chiefs' last preseason game versus Seattle. He can do some really fun gadget stuff as a rusher. He can take the end arounds and that sort of thing. Some of the old Debo stuff. But Moore has never really been much of a receiving weapon. The first 2 years of his career, he had nearly identical stat lines, around 22 catches for 250 yards and a singular touchdown. So not offering that much through the air. And then last year, he was completely buried on the depth chart. He only played in 6 games, 3 targets all year long, did not get a single reception. Sky Moore has had a drop problem his entire career, and when you're playing with Patrick Mahomes, every drop could be the difference between a first-round bye and a wild card weekend game. So that's largely why he got pushed down the depth chart. I suppose Moore's got some good athleticism. He's quick, and he's an interesting gadget player, but adding him at receiver doesn't really move the needle for me at all when it comes to the passing game in that wide receiver position. The bright side, though, is that this is just about the smallest compensation you can possibly send back to the Chiefs for a player. As a reminder, these draft picks that are exchanging hands, these are not for next year's draft. This is not for the 2026 draft. This is for the year after that, 2027. So really, this is a really, really low stakes trade happening with Sky Moore here. Moore might not be any good, and he might not make this Niners team, but this is not an overpay. We can rest easy knowing that. Now, we've got a couple of other moves from Wednesday as well. The Niners have signed wide receiver Malik Knowles and offensive lineman Michael Dunn, and waived Damone Harris and rookie Corey Kiner. Now, Kiner was waived with an injury designation, which means if he passes through the waiver wire, then he will revert back to the Niners injured reserve list. I'm really not sure if he will. Kiner's a really talented running back, and he was a high priority undrafted free agent. But a high ankle sprain that's going to keep him out for at least a month and probably a month and a half, it's pretty brutal. So we'll see if any team takes a chance on him or if he ends up back on the Niners injured reserve. Michael Dunn is interesting. He's played over 40 games for the Browns and plays both guard spots and center. He probably won't be a long-term starter or anything like that, but he is versatile. It's late in the preseason, so we'll see if he's got enough time to make the team. But even if he doesn't, I could see him being a veteran practice squad call-up until Pooney is healthy. And of course, receiver Malik Knowles was with the team earlier in camp. Jacob Cowing and Malik Turner missed practice on Wednesday, so Knowles and Sky Moore are probably filling in that void right there. Now, John Lynch has gone through 8 seasons now as the general manager of the 49ers, or I guess I should say off seasons. He's made countless moves. He's made signings, trades, draft picks, you name it. Some of these moves are not very good, but some were amazing. So let's go over Lynch's top 5 moves in his general manager career. Now, for this list, I'm not going to include any draft picks just because I think that would make the list a little boring. Yeah, obviously, drafting Brock Purdy with the last pick in the draft is great, and taking George Kittle in the 5th round, and even taking Nick Bosa 2nd overall. These are all incredible moves, and they would probably make it on this list, but we know that already. So for some more variety, I'm going to restrict this to only signings and trades. So let's get started with number 5. signing cornerback Charvarius Ward. Now, this fifth spot on the list was very competitive, but I think I just had to go with Ward here. In that free agency class, the top cornerbacks available were J.C. Jackson, Carlton Davis, and DJ Reed. And while you could argue maybe Reed was a little bit better, I think that Charvarius Ward's peak was better than the peak of all three of those other players. Of course, his peak was that 2023 Super Bowl season with the Niners, when he was an All-Pro and was just shut down on the outside. Lots of 49ers fans wanted Jackson and Davis, given that the team had a pretty big cornerback need at that point, and some were even disappointed when the team signed Ward. He was largely viewed as like a plan B or sort of a second-tier signing. But he was signed for a deal half the size of J.C. Jackson's, and Jackson was terrible for the Chargers. So the reason that I'm including Ward on this list is partially because he was fantastic for the Niners, but also because if they had gone after J.C. Jackson or even Carlton Davis, I think it would have set the team back. Sometimes the best moves are the ones that you don't make. Now at number 4, I'm going with a bit of a weird one, trading back in the 2017 class from number 2 overall to number 3. Now, the Niners ended up taking Solomon Thomas at number 3 overall, and that's not what I'm talking about. That was not a great draft pick. I'm just talking about the trade. In order to move up one spot, the Bears traded to the 49ers a third and a fourth rounder in 2017 and a third rounder in 2018. That 2017 third rounder was later rerouted to become a second rounder in 2018. The fourth rounder was used to move up, and the 2018 third rounder became none other than Fred Warner. So thank you, Chicago Bears, for the best linebacker in the NFL. You know, a GM entering his first ever NFL draft and making a move that savvy and that high stakes at the top of the draft, it's really, really impressive. And while most of the draft picks that came from this trade did not work out, one of them did in a really big way in Fred Warner. And the move itself I thought was very impressive, so I just had to include it. Now, at number 3, I'm including the 2018 signing of Richard Sherman. This move is so good for many reasons, but I'll always come back to how good it felt to screw over the Seahawks. In the 2010s, Seattle absolutely dominated the 49ers. We were the little brothers to the Legion of Boom era Seahawks, that being during the Harbaugh era and after it. It had been so long since the Niners got a real screw-you kind of win against the Seahawks, and this was the moment that the table started to turn. Seattle released Sherman, surprisingly, in 2018, and 3 days later, the Seahawks franchise legend was a 49er. I can't even imagine how much that must have hurt the Seahawks fans. To this day, Sherm is still very complimentary of the Niners and his former teammates and coaches. He even came to training camp for a day this year. But this move was just as good on the field as it was off the field. Sherman was awesome in that 2019 Super Bowl year for the 49ers. He was a Pro Bowler and an All-Pro with some really big wins over Seattle on the way to a Super Bowl appearance. This is pretty similar to the Charvarius Ward signing, but I think with the off-field stuff included, Sherm just had to be here at number 3. Top 2 now, and these should be pretty obvious in my opinion. Number 2 is the trade deadline deal for Christian McCaffrey in 2022. The Niners gave up a lot for McCaffrey, a second, third, and fourth rounder in the 2023 draft, and a fifth rounder in the 2024 draft. But CMC was immediately worth it. He completely revitalized this Niners offense and was a huge reason the 2022 season was even relevant. The Niners were 3-3 when they traded for McCaffrey, and 3-4 by the time he got his first start. Trey Lance was out for the year, Jimmy G was not playing great, but as soon as McCaffrey got the start at running back, he had a 3-touchdown day versus the Rams with a rushing, receiving, and passing touchdown. That game was crazy. And the Niners ended the regular season with 10 straight victories. Now, we all know what happened in the playoffs, right? Brock Purdy tears his UCL against the Eagles, Christian McCaffrey having to play Wildcat quarterback by the end of that game, but I truly believe that the Niners would have been extremely competitive in that game and in the Super Bowl if Purdy wasn't hurt. But how does McCaffrey follow up that 22 season? Well, with an Offensive Player of the Year award in 2023 and a trip to the Super Bowl. Yes, CMC was hurt last year. Yes, the loss of draft picks has hurt the depth of this team, but this has been one of the best moves in the NFL, period, over the last 8 years, and on this list, it's number 2. So what could possibly beat the CMC trade? Well, it's the best trade that I've ever seen the 49ers make, trading a third and a fifth round pick for first ballot Hall of Famer left tackle Trent Williams. This move is not talked about nearly enough. It's almost impossible to fathom just how good Trent Williams is. And the fact that the Commanders, who I think were the Washington football team back then, the fact that Washington didn't even get a second round pick for him is mind-boggling. Trent has been the best offensive lineman in the NFL and at times in contention for the best player in the NFL since that trade went down. 4 Pro Bowls, 3 first-team All-Pros, at one of the most important positions in football. I mean, what else is there to say about the best offensive lineman I have ever seen play football? So those are my top 5 moves in John Lynch's history. Thank you to John for really making it easy to be a fan of the Niners sometimes. What do you think was Lynch's best move ever? Leave it in a comment down below. Now, for our next segment, with all the injuries that the current Niners roster is dealing with, there's some former 49ers taking notice and who might want to return. Former right guard John Feliciano, who was with the team for the 2023 Super Bowl year before getting hurt and losing his starting spot to Dominic Puni, has been very active on his own social media about wanting to come back to San Francisco. And on Monday, he was on 95.7 The Game, saying, quote, "I'm retired for about 27 or 28 teams. There's a handful of teams that I would love to come back to. San Francisco is definitely number one," end quote. Yeah, that's pretty high praise from Feliciano, and he was a solid starter when he was with us last, in all honesty. If the Puni or Barch injuries start to linger, I'd love to see Feliciano back. He's played plenty of center in his career. He played well when he was here last. He wants to come back. He knows the scheme, and he can play guard and center. Sounds like kind of a slam dunk, if you ask me. Now, another former Niner, wide receiver Marquise Goodwin, had an entire Instagram post on Monday dedicated to the 49ers, talking about how much being in the Bay changed his life. Now, it seems like he was setting up a potential meet and greet in San Francisco, but he hasn't officially retired from the NFL as far as I can see. So is a reunion in the cards for Marquise Goodwin with all these wide receiver injuries? It's clear to me that the team doesn't want to spend very much on a receiver, and I can't imagine Goodwin would cost more than the minimum. So let me know in the comments down below. Should the Niners sign Marquise Goodwin or John Feliciano or both? Now, this channel is always going to have a 49ers focus, right? But there are 31 other teams out there, and they've all got their own storylines going on. Wednesday had a whole lot of trade activity with the Sky Moore trade, the Jets making 2 trades for defensive tackles, and the Saints trading for Broncos receiver Devon Vele. So I took a look around the league, and I wanted to bring up some names who might very well be on the move by the time rosters are cut down to 53. And let's start with the New England Patriots. We've talked about receiver Kendrick Bourne a whole lot, but they've got another veteran who might have lost his spot on the roster. It's safety Kyle Dugger. Dugger was a really good player for the Patriots at the back end of the Bill Belichick era. He's a thumping, hybrid safety with good instincts and a really sure tackler, but unfortunately, he's been taking the majority of his reps as a backup behind guys like Jalen Hawkins, Marcus Epps, Jabril Peppers, and their rookie safety Craig Woodson from Cal. Now, those guys are fine players, but this isn't exactly the best safety room in the league. The fact that Dugger is being buried on the depth chart has more to do with his play than the play of the guys around him. Dugger's already 29, and he's on a pretty giant contract for a safety, so while I do think he's talented and could be a contributor for some other team, I can't imagine anybody wants to take on that entire deal. I think the Patriots will eventually have to cut Dugger, and at that point, I'd love to see him come down to San Francisco for cheap. Siegel, Mustafa, Dugger, that is a trio that can hit. Those guys would be taking heads. Now, another guy who I think will definitely be moved is Commanders running back Brian Robinson Jr. Now, Robinson Jr. has had a pretty nice career for the Commanders as a big bruising back. He's hovered around 800 yards for all 3 years of his career and has scored more touchdowns every single season, with 8 last year, all while playing in committee backfields. Robinson would bring a power presence to the Niners running back room that they don't really have right now. But the issue is he's clearly lost some of his explosiveness. With Patrick Taylor Jr. out for the year, Robinson could be a nice player to fill in that role. However, I'm not sure he has the special teams chops. I think Robinson ends up on a new team this year, but I don't think it'll ultimately be the 49ers, given that the Niners already have a guy on their roster who's kind of like a Robinson Jr. light in Jeff Wilson. Now, last but not least, let's head on over to the Chicago Bears and talk about Braxton Jones, their left tackle. Jones was a 5th-round pick back in 2022, and he's been a starter all 3 years of his career. Now, unfortunately, he's got a bit of an injury history. He's played 11 games and 12 over the past 2 years, and missed the end of last year due to a fractured fibula. He's been practicing in training camp, and he appears like he's back from the injury, but now the question is he going to be this team's starter? He's in a competition with 2nd-round pick Ozzy Trapilo and former UDFA Theo Benedette for the starting left tackle job. And I can't help but wonder if new coach Ben Johnson would rather go with one of Trapilo or Benedette and get some draft capital back for Jones. Offensive linemen don't become available often, especially not starting caliber ones. So if you can get a 4th-round pick for a guy you maybe wouldn't start anyways, I think you've got to consider it if you're Chicago. I think if the Bears do decide to go in that direction, Jones could be a great candidate for the 49ers as a potential replacement for Colton McKivitz at right tackle. I think that Braxton Jones, Brian Robinson Jr., and Kyle Duggar will all be changing teams next week, but should the 49ers go after any of those guys and make another trade? Let me know down below, leave a comment, leave a like, and let me know if there's any topics that you'd like to see me cover. Thank you all for watching, and subscribe for 49ers videos 5 days a week. I'm Brady Grustas at Grustas Brady on X. This has been Niners Now, and I'll see you tomorrow.